to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for the City of Franklin. This is Thursday, May the 9th. First item on the agenda is call to order. I'll do a roll call vote in order to do that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Present.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Present.
Alderman Baggett is not present, and the chair is present. The second item on the agenda is setting of the agenda, and that's a consideration of changes in the agenda and setting the agenda. The first item is discussion or removal of items from consent not requiring a vote. Does anyone want to change anything on the agenda? Then proposed changes to the agenda, none. Then let's do an approval of the agenda as submitted or charged. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to move the agenda as presented.
Second.
Proper motion to a second. Let's do a roll call vote on that also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes also. The next item is citizen comments, and this is open to any citizen that wishes to make a comment on any item, whether it's on the agenda or not. Seeing none, let's go then to approval of the minutes. This is April 11th, 2024 Budget and Finance Committee meeting minutes. Hope everyone's had a chance to look at those. Any corrections, deletions, or additions to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Proper motion?
Second.
Okay. Let's do a roll call vote on those also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. Then let's go to item 3, which is consideration of draft ordinance 2024-16 and ordinance to amend the budget of the City of Franklin for fiscal year 2023 through 2024. Eric, Michael, whichever one. Go ahead, Michael.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget and Finance Committee. Michael Walters Young, your Budget and Strategic Innovation Manager, at least for a meeting or so. Ordinance 2024-16.
He's not going away. His
I'm not
title
going
is
away.
changing. Okay.
What you refer to me to, aside from the guy in the hat, is may change. Ordinance 2024-16 is a rather detailed and lengthy amendment to true up the fiscal 24 annual operating and capital budget so that it matches the next item, which is the proposed spending plan for the upcoming fiscal year of 2025. There are 5 separate amendments, and I'll go through each of them by fund here over the ensuing minutes. We have year-end revenue modifications. We have the addition of a 27th payroll. We have year-end expense modifications. We have indirect or administrative service fund cost allocation modifications, and we have cash balance requirements. Why this will take a few minutes is because there are changes being proposed to the appropriations in 11 of our 15 budgeted funds in order to finish things by June 30th. So let us start with the general fund. The general fund remains in balance. Revenues and expenditures are proposed to increase by $8.336 million. This is attributable on the revenue side to 8 individual items. An increase of property tax revenue by $500,000. This is a result of lowering the amount necessary to contribute to the debt service fund because the fund balance in that fund is sufficient at year end, and additional resources can go to the general fund. The second is an increase in the local sales tax estimates, of $2.25 million. We were inherently conservative, as we always are when we built the 24 budget. This year's current budget is $1 million less than where we ended last year. So we propose that we'll probably make a couple $100,000 more than where this budget will take us to, but it will result in a increase of about 2.2% from this year's budget to next year's budget, and Eric will review that in greater detail in the next item. The third is a decrease in the sports wagering privilege tax, which is originally budgeted to the general fund. That we are moving that to the street aid and transportation fund because it's the only place that the state allows us to legally spend these monies. The next is a lowering of our grant for TOC for intersection improvements. This is a pretty standard amendment. You'll see a decrease in expenses as well. As we're able to get these improvements done, or in many cases in the last several years, it just takes a little while longer to get them done. We lower appropriations, both revenues and expenses, at the end of the year. They are in the fiscal 25 budget. Hopefully, the projects will be completed in the next fiscal year. Item 5 is an increase in grants for license plate readers. You recently executed this agreement on a board meeting agenda, and there's an increase in expense as well. 6 is an increase, a draw from the American Rescue Plan Act of $1 million. This is also an agreement you've executed to help defray the costs of the Franklin Housing Authority for related to their redevelopment of the Cherokee development. Item 7 under revenues is an increase in investment interest of $3.1 million. Higher interest rates have a silver lining, and that is you can earn more money. And the city and its ability to structure investments, albeit conservatively, we are receiving far more earnings off of those investments, and that you'll see that both in the fiscal 24 budget here as well as fiscal 25. And finally is the use of fund balance to the tune of $1.77 million for one-time needs as identified in these expenses. So the first expense item is the 27th payroll. So when you pay employees every 2 weeks, you do it normally 26 times a year. But there's 365 and a quarter days per year, and those don't always add up. In some fiscal year, every 7 to 10 years, you have to kind of catch up. This is that time. So we are increasing, you'll see this in all of our operational funds, that we have to put more money in one time for the 27th payroll to continue to pay people every 2 weeks. So that's the main reason why the 25 budget is actually lower than the 24 budget, because there's one less payroll recorded in it. Second, there are personnel increases overall of $1.7 million at the end of the year. This is for a variety of different reasons. We have retirement payouts. We have vacancy adjustments. We have overfill hires. We have the wages that you recently voted to increase for police department employees, as well as overtime costs in public safety. This is partially offset by reduction of any remaining wages that we had budgeted in general expenses for COLA and merit increases that we did not use. On the operations side, there's a net nearly $2 million of increases, also for a variety of purposes. Slightly higher costs than we budgeted for the municipal elections in October of 2023. $400,000 additional necessary for facilities, higher repair and maintenance. A lot of it is various repairs we've had to make in this building. $125,000 for the costs incurred of a cyber attack in 2023 in the IT department. $1.15 million in general expenses. $1 million of that is the aforementioned ARPA monies for the Franklin Housing Authority. That's where we're accounting for it. And then $500,000 in transfers to other funds, which is simply moving the replacement of a vehicle from the police department into the fleet replacement fund for emergency management purposes. The third and final item is capital, and that's a decrease of $316,000. That, again, is a netting of a variety of different things. The lowering of the grants, partially offset by an increase for the emergency repairs to Baker's Bridge. The decrease of $500,000, again, the moving of that vehicle, the increase for license plate readers, and additional costs for some of the PERs that were originally budgeted in this fiscal 24 budget. There is an increase in the general fund for administrative service fund costs. So last year we began, and for the last 8 to 10 months, staff has worked, and our now recently departed management fellow, Ahla Rajpari, was instrumental in doing this study. As we've talked about, administrative service funds or indirect costs are a method that we charge appropriate amount of to the time of Eric and Christine and me and all of the support service departments and general fund departments that serve water management, stormwater, and sanitation. But it is sound policy to review those ratios and rates of charge-offs every once in a while. We have completed that, found that we need to lower the amounts that those three funds are contributing to the general fund. That means, of course, if we're lowering the amounts to the general fund must incur more of that cost. We are proposing to implement this now, and thus it is baked into the fiscal 25 budget as well. Finally, the sanitation fund needs an additional $1 million increase at year end to meet state requirements for cash and fund balance amounts. The rest of this is pretty straightforward, ticking and tying. As mentioned, the street aid and transportation fund is going up by $120,000 due to the wagering monies. Sanitation has increases due to revenues of that transfer from the general fund, the 27th payroll, and decreases, however, in the amount needed for debt and the amount that they are contributing to the general fund for indirects. Stormwater, much the same, increased costs for the payroll, decreased costs for indirects, and an increase for 2 fleet vehicles. Drug fund has a slight increase in their expenses for training and canine operations. Hotel motel fund. This slide is now out of date. We had proposed an increase at year end of $2.8 million. We are still making that recommendation because it has no overall impact and keeps the numbers that you have in front of you in your printed books the same. $10,000 is needed to transfer to the debt service fund to cover the debt that we apportion to the hotel motel fund. But the other amount was $2.8 million for the final aspect of Creekside land purchase. This amount will not be moving forward, as Eric indicated to you via correspondence at the end of last week. But it won't go anywhere. It's simply a budget allocation that will simply stay in the fund balance of the hotel motel fund. The transit fund is increasing by $45,000. If you recall, we have moved the position of the parking enforcement officer, now transit inspector, from the police department and are budgeting it in the transit fund. The community development block grant has increases of revenues and expenditures and matching amounts of $375,000 due to a variety of reimbursements that have been authorized via the fund. Debt service fund, I've already discussed. The revenue decrease, fleet replacement is for that vehicle. And water management has both the addition of the 27th payroll and the decrease of administrative service fund or indirect modifications. On the screen are the changes in 11 different funds. 4 of them are increasing their fund balance, 4 of them are decreasing their fund balance, and 3 of them have absolutely no change. But it ties everything together so that everything that Eric is about to tell you and changes to fund balance actually will now tie to his presentation and your book. With that, Mr. Chairman, that should wrap up fiscal 24, and I'm happy to stand for any questions you or the committee might have.
Any questions? None. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Sir.
Appreciate that. Then if there are no questions, let's go to item 4, which is.
That is an ordinance, Mr. Chairman, if we could get a recommendation to move it
Let's
on
do
to
that
the
then.
board.
I'll entertain a motion to approve and forward ordinance 2024-16 to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Proper motion is second. Let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. Okay. So that completes item 3. Let's go to item 4 then, consideration of draft ordinance 2024-17. An ordinance of the City of Franklin, Tennessee, adopting a budget for the fiscal year 2024-25 and providing an effective date. Eric?
I'll kick it off, and I have a presentation to provide you with an overview of the recommended budget. So I've condensed down, our team has condensed down a 480-page document to about 30 PowerPoint slides. So we'll walk through those in the next several minutes. And I'm honored to present to you as a committee and to the board and to the community this recommended budget. Today, we reach a significant mile marker, if you will, in the marathon that is producing a municipal budget. And this is the home stretch, if you will, in terms of the public deliberation and decisions that will be made through the balance of May and June. This all started back in December when we set some budget goals, followed by our first cut at revenue estimates in January, and then you patiently listened to departments present their needs and their vision for what they needed and wanted to accomplish in the coming year through multiple meetings in February and March. And we worked with you on your guidance related to program enhancements, and likewise in January. And here we are in early May presenting this budget for your consideration. We'll walk through the overview, the general fund, and revenue and expenditures on that aspect, the other funds, and then we'll close it out. And then glad to take any questions, comments that you all have as we look to move this forward to the full board for their first vote would be the second meeting in May, first reading, public hearing at your first meeting in June, and then final approval at the end of June. So, we talked about budget goals that you all passed and set for us and that the board approved in December. They really, in summary, these 4 bullets, I think, really do a pretty good job of talking about what we're about. Maintaining high-quality services, identifying, preserving capacity that helps us respond to future needs and meet the quality of life needs for today, investing in and planning for the future, and making sure we maintain our position as a highly competitive community, both in terms of service level, tax rate, and overall just quality of what we do. The numbers, high-level numbers, Michael referenced it a little bit, but when you look at the fiscal 25 budget compared to 24, it is at $226.9 million, which is actually a slight decrease, around 5% compared to fiscal 24. The general fund budget itself is just over $112 million, which is a 1.6% decrease from the current budget. Michael talked about the additional payroll that we have in this year. That's a factor, but also, especially when you look at all funds, you see some maybe higher level of cash expenditures for some capital projects that you may or may not see materialize in the projected fiscal 25. So, we do make amendments as we go through the year to respond to the reality of what projects move forward and what needs are. And obviously, as we look at capital projects, cash plays an incredibly important component. It is the majority of the funding of our capital investment plan. So some highlights of the budget overall. It is a balanced budget. It fully complies with your policies related to both fund balance, fund reserves, and debt capacity. We maintain and enhance our services. The bottom line of our property tax rate remains unchanged. It is at just a little over 32 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. That is the lowest property tax of any city in Tennessee with a population of 50,000 or greater, and is a highly competitive rate when you look at other cities across the country, especially those high-performing cities that we compete with for investment and that we look at as benchmarks. The budget does include several new positions across the organization. I touch on just a few highlights. There is the new internship program that the fire department is starting. This is an active effort to recruit folks considering public safety and specifically the fire service. This provides an opportunity to learn more and for us to learn more about those individuals and see if there's an opportunity to open that pipeline up as future firefighters with the Franklin Police Department or Fire Department. Fire Department today, that I just want to note that we just received our confirmation or reconfirmation of our ISO 1 rating. And so that high quality service starts with the men and women that serve every day, and creating a strong pipeline of folks that are coming into that honorable profession is important. But that ISO 1 rating, there's over 38,000 fire agencies across the country. There's just about only 498 that have that ISO 1 rating. So that's a little over 1%. If you look at that, and so we are in that very exclusive group. So that's just a side note. Other places that we're looking to add positions within the police department, a sergeant with our flex team. We also are looking to add a new position in engineering, a mobility coordinator position. This will work with transit, both on the local level, but also looking at regional and looking at other transportation planning initiatives. We are also restoring in our budget the position of Assistant Director in IT that works directly with the infrastructure component. That had been the position our current IT Director held before he became Director, and kind of was wearing two hats over the last pretty much 4 years, and now we are restoring that position in this budget. We do add late in the fiscal year, around this time next year, 3 new parks positions that will align with adding new facilities and upgraded facilities, making sure we're maintaining those at a high level. There are several reclassifications across the organization in streets, in parks, city court, water management, and building and neighborhood services that also recognize the evolving nature of some of our jobs. Also create some career ladders, which are great to encourage our team members to take on new certifications and new skills, and to reward them for doing so because they can then serve the community at a higher level. When we talk about our people, well, before I go into those, those are all come from program enhancements. You heard Michael reference that, or we call them for short PERs, and you all got the chance to rate those. And those are sprinkled throughout this budget. Across all budgets, you saw about $20 million of program enhancements that were requested, and we funded just under 5 million of those. And within that 20 million, 16 million were in the general fund, and within that, about 4 million are funded. It's a combination of positions, equipment, different other services that are needed to make sure we're still serving and building services at the highest level we can. We talk about taking care of our team. You'll see in a later slide, nearly 3/4 of our general fund budget goes to personnel costs. We deliver our services through our people. And we provide for a base market increase for all of our team members at 3%. And then on top of that, a performance-based increase that would range between 0.5% up to an additional 2.5% of pay. So you'd see a range of 3.5% to 5.5% pay increases for our team members provided for in this budget. We also have updated in this budget for the first time in over 20 years, the longevity pay program. The current program provides a longevity recognition payment every 5 years. What we are proposing to do is to establish that as an annual payment, and a payment that occurs to all team members in the month of November. So it kind of doubles as a holiday bonus, if you will, but serves as a recognition for folks' service at $50 per year, capped at a 30-year equivalent, or $1,500 would be the maximum that a long-serving city employee would receive through this program. We did benchmark this with a couple other of our competitors in the region, other local governments, and this does put us at a good position compared to them in terms of providing some form of longevity pay or recognition. So we've got that. The other piece that's always important to our team members, both in terms of the quality of service and support it provides them and their families, is our health insurance program. We are pleased to say that we're going to be able to hold the line on health insurance costs in this fiscal year. So that is a very positive development, and it's a very good health insurance program, and we're pleased that we're going to be able to provide it at the same level of cost that it is today for our team. Then moving to some highlights that relate to outside the general fund, just a couple here. We'll talk a little more about this in a little bit. The fiscal 25 budget does include a increase in the fee for residential trash and recycling. You may remember a couple months ago, we presented a cost of service study, and this recommended to fully support this fund through user fees that we would need to move to a $31 a month fee for all services provided by our sanitation team for residential customers. This budget includes that recommendation. So that is in there today, and then that would really eliminate, and then the 5-year rate plan that would be a companion to this would really sustain that throughout the next 5 years in terms of making sure that rates or fees paid by our customers support those operations fully. We also have the previously approved water rate and sewer rate increases, 3% for water, 2.5% for sewer. Those have already been approved, but those would go into effect January 1 of 2025. We do provide throughout the budget document measures that relate back to our strategic plan, sustainability initiatives that our departments have taken on for several years that show the stewardship of our departments and their leadership in both meeting service needs, but also doing it in a way that is responsible and sustainable over the long haul. One of the other elements in this budget that we've incorporated is an effort to do some reorganization. This does provide for some shifting of reporting and some different establishment or classification of those functions. There are four things I would highlight for you, just sort of working left to right on this chart, this kind of traditional organizational chart structure. You see the third box from the left, the Budget and Performance Office. This is, Michael referenced this a little bit earlier, but we would pull out some of our staff that has worked in both finance and in our development services group in an analyst role to form an Office of Budget and Performance. And so Michael would head this up as our Chief Budget and Performance Officer, and then we would have analysts specialized in public works and development services, and then an overall sort of budget and finance analyst working with that team, and then our management fellow as well would be part of that team. I really liken it to sort of an internal consulting group. Yes, they're responsible for delivering and helping track our budget and performance, but they also can work on a series of projects and provide critical analytical support throughout those efforts in supporting our departments across the organization. So we're excited to do that. We do that without adding any positions. We just create that team, and that team will report directly to me, to the city administrator. Again, a few other things I want to highlight within the Public Works group. We are shifting our Office of Emergency Management into that Public Works group. They work very closely with the responses that come with some of the types of severe weather we saw last night through our streets and public works team. Also, obviously, working pretty closely with our public safety components as well, but that would report up through our Assistant City Administrator, Mark Hilty, in Public Works. So we would shift that over. That had previously been reporting to the City Administrator. We are also within the Finance and Administration group that Christine heads up. Two changes I want to highlight there. We are elevating the Office of Revenue Management into a department called the Billing and Licensing Department. So we're not adding staff, but we are recognizing that that team of 25 people provides a lot of service in terms of utility billing and licensing and the city court function and just customer service overall, that we wanted to elevate that and have Jessica serve as a department director in supporting that element of service to the community. So that's a change within the budget. And then we are also shifting the Human Resources Department under that group as well. This has a lot of support service components throughout this, and Human Resources is a vital and important support service for every aspect of what we do and would function within that group as well. Obviously, I'd still work pretty closely with a lot of aspects of what happens in human resources, but Christine would, and her team would also partner with that group and delivering services to our employees, to their families, and supporting the work of recruiting, retaining the best talent we can for our city team. So those are the aspects of shifts that are proposed within this budget. There are no new positions created through this, but I think it's a better alignment in terms of how we can work together in these various teams and overall serve, and also how I work through the central administration to serve and support the board and working with and serving our citizens. All right, let's look at the general fund budget. We'll go through revenues and expenditures at a high level, looking at how that breaks out. Local sales tax, you see, continues to be the dominant revenue source at over 56%. That number has fluctuated anywhere between 58 to 55% over the last several years. You see it here right there at 56%. You also see state shared revenue, which is really a form of the statewide sales tax that comes back to cities based on their population. That's at about 14.5% of our total revenue within the $112 million general fund. That I would highlight as we speak about that. One of the elements of this budget is also funding for a special census that we would do during fiscal '25. I would like to target doing that in the fall of this coming fall, so fall of '24, to get those updated population counts. Rough estimate, we receive about $125 per person per capita of population that we can certify and document. So we believe our population has grown from around 83,500, that was the federal census number in 2020, to we think in the 90,000 range, if not a little bit above. So we want to capture that and get credit for that so that we get our fair share of taxes our citizens already pay to the state of Tennessee. So there's that piece. You'll also see property tax at just under 12%, and that is the net amount of property tax after we pay our general obligation debt that goes in to pay for general fund operations. So those three are really the lion's share of revenue within our budget. You see some other key components, 5% for alcohol tax, also another consumption tax. Our permits and franchise fees all around 2%. Interest income has grown pretty significantly in the last year or so as we're seeing higher earnings at about 3%. So let's look at that from a different standpoint. We talked about the idea that so much of our revenue is consumption-based. You see over 3/4 when you consider sales tax, state shared tax, and consumption-based taxes like the alcohol tax all equate to a really significant portion of our total revenue. That is a strong thing that enables us to not have to have a very high property tax. That's good, but it also is more sensitive to economic swings. So that's why you see us carrying a larger reserve at a lot of times than other cities might have, because we do have a stronger base of our revenue in that consumption area that is a little more sensitive to economic change. So that's just another way to think about our revenue structure. We've shared that for you the last several years, and it continues to be a pretty similar story. So when you look at how we use those funds and where those are allocated within our various service areas, public safety is nearly half, around 47% of our total expenditures go to police and fire. You see then it's pretty equally spread between the other areas of finance administration, public works, and then our community and economic development service areas in terms of how those dollars land. The other way to look at the expenditures is by the expenditure category. And as I said, a significant portion, over 80 million or 72%, is in the personnel realm. So salaries, benefits of our team members end up being the lion's share of that of the budget overall. And then you see about a 25% component in the operations, so contracts, materials that support our operations, and then just around 3% in the capital equipment phase. So not to be confused with capital projects, which is its own animal in terms of the large investment in infrastructure projects. So then when you look at the overall financial performance of the general fund over the last nearly 10 years, you'll see a pretty consistent performance where we've been able to live within our means in terms of our expenditures being at or below the total revenue that we've generated. You'll see that we project out a contribution in the current budget to our fund balance or fund reserves of about $1.5 million is what is projected at this time in terms of a conservative estimate. So we continue to see that and are pleased by the really good management and stewardship of every department and living within their budget and the overall work that our budget team does and monitoring that. So just to summarize what we see in our general fund, we're proud to deliver a high level of service, but do it within our means and with one of the lowest property tax rates of any city our size within Tennessee and across the nation. That we are investing in our people. with highly competitive compensation and benefits programs. In particular, there is an emphasis on our competitive position in the public safety realm. Just a meeting or so ago, the board approved an adjustment for police to put us in that top echelon of pay for police departments across our region. That same work is going on with our fire department to look at where we land competitively there. We hope to present that to you by the end of the month, so you'll see that as well. This budget anticipates both what you've approved in police and what we expect to bring forward in fire, and supports that fully into fiscal 25. And then again, our year-end reserves are very healthy, meets all of your policy levels, and provides a significant available cash resource to support capital investment programs. So here's an overall chart summarizing our revenue position, our revenue generation from these various sources. Again, leading the way is local sales tax, followed by state shared and property tax. And the next several slides will take you through those elements and talk about how they roll through and support the general fund operations. Again, local sales tax is our biggest. We are projecting an increase budget to budget of about 2.2%. When we look at where we're projecting revenue for 24, it's really more like 1.5%, 1.5% compared to where we think fiscal 24 is going to actually land. And as we stand today, we have about 8 months of real revenue in the sales tax and 4 months of projection, but we are pretty comfortable we're going to come in a little bit above the current budget. And again, you see a slight increase there. When we look at this is a comparison we do from time to time to just look at our sales tax generation versus our property tax generation 10-year trend. You see a pretty significant jump up in 22. That represents when the half-cent sales tax was implemented and came to the city. So you see that piece. So that really extended the imbalance, if you will, between sales tax and property tax. But you do see a steady growth in property tax and a little stronger growth from fiscal 24 into fiscal 25. And we'll talk in just a little bit about what drives that. Here you see our property tax rate dating back to the mid-'80s up until today, and you see a pretty steady decrease. At one point, it was well over $2, and as it stands today, it is 32 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. We do see an increase in property tax revenue going to general fund operations this year, and that is thanks to a reduction in the amount of debt service we're having to pay out of the general fund in fiscal 25 compared to 24. 24 was a bit of a peak for our total debt service obligation for general obligation debt. And so we do see that drop a little bit. So that makes more money available to help support operations. We have not issued general obligation debt for about 5 years. That will change probably by the end of this calendar year. So we do have some debt we are planning to issue, largely to support capital projects, thinking specifically about the Southeast Park and Robinson Lake as significant parks projects that will require some of the bonded debt to help support it, along with cash that will make those capital projects move forward. So, but that is a real positive that we have managed that peak in debt service and are in a good position moving forward with a manageable overall debt obligation. All right, so other general fund revenues, we touched on those. Alcohol tax just under $6 million, showing a fairly strong growth. Our building permit and licensing, the work that goes to support development that our building and neighborhood services leads on, fairly flat, but about a 1% increase. We're fairly conservative in how we approach that. So that's one piece there. We do see a dip in terms of how the budget is described with grants that are coming through. We had some pass-through grants that we managed, and that is one that always does sort of coincide with how projects are timing out. So as it stands today, it shows a reduction that may modify some based on the timing of projects and project delivery. We have several projects that have a significant federal component to it. And so as we draw on those funds, you might see some changes in that grant revenue. As we referenced before, interest income has seen a healthy growth in the last year. We saw an increase of 9%, and that is thanks to we have available cash that is available for investment, and we've seen an increase in the earnings environment overall. So this gives you another look at that fund balance. I would look at that in terms of projecting at the end of this year, and then with a balanced budget in 25, we would expect to be just a little bit under $86.2 million in total fund balance. That equates to just under 77%. Some other things to look at when you think about where we are related to overall fund balance and how that relates. You have a minimum requirement as a policy matter of 33%, obviously well above that. The board then added to that policy to say anything that is above 45% can be considered as eligible to help fund capital investment projects as a cash resource. So when you say, okay, what does that number look like? Of that 86 million, you would have around 33.6 million that is by that policy available for the support of capital projects as a pay-as-you-go or a cash source to help with those CIP elements. So you've got that as well. Next slide just is another way to break down the specific numbers by our service areas: governance and management, public safety, finance and administration, community economic development, public works. So those are sort of the broader service categories, or the expenditure categories, as we talked about in the previous slide, with personnel, operations, and capital. So this gives you the breakout and a couple years of history with it as well. So just a little more detail related to that. Pension is an important component also. We talked about the pay and the health insurance premiums and the change in longevity pay, which are all really healthy and important to supporting our team members. But this pension component is every bit as important. It's a little bit under the radar in terms of what we think about, but it is very, very important. We fully fund our pension obligations in this budget, as we always do. But it had some significant demands in it this year, comparing budget to budget 24 into 25. Our closed pension, which is about 2/3 of our team members are in that closed pension program, that actuarially determined number rose by $3 million budget to budget. We were able to absorb that in this budget. And so that's a significant piece. The TCRS component, which is what we call the open plan, that is the statewide TCRS program, that grew just slightly from 7.3 to 7.6% in terms of a percent of salary contribution that TCRS is required of us. And so collectively, when you look at all the pension obligations rolled together, it's about 17% of our payroll goes into the pension component. And that provides for long-term support of our employees into their retirement and of their families. One of the things the board does and that we do through the budget is provide support for a series of outside agencies that are our partners in delivering key services to the community. This reflects on that as well. A general increase of 3% was applied to our various community agency and nonprofit partners in this budget to provide for an inflation allocation. We did also provide support to a new entity at a level of $5,000, the Hard Bargain Association, for their affordable and attainable housing work, put in a request for $5,000, which we did incorporate in this budget. This also includes a contractual increase that is a little bit above in that inflationary number for the animal control operation that the county provides on behalf of the city. So that is a good deal for us in terms of providing that service that we'd otherwise have to equip and staff and provide, and they provide it on our behalf. excuse me. This just provides a list of all the various other funds. When we use that term other funds, this is the list we're talking about. I'm going to go through over the next few slides and highlight some key areas from those. Glad to talk about any of the other ones, but these are really the highlights and significant changes. Here you see the numbers by fund. Collectively, our all funds is down about 5%. So you see a number of those are lower than they are today in terms of what is going to be needed to be appropriated in fiscal 25 compared to where we are in the current budget. So this just gives you a sense of how that lays out. Some highlights. The Stormwater Fund has a budget of just under $4.5 million. We continue with the fee structure that we implemented about 5 years ago. It has not been updated. We probably will need to take a look at that as we prepare next year's budget. And when we did that, we said this fee adjustment should cover us for about 5 years. We're coming up on that. The biggest single additional expenditure out of this fund is we need to replace an old and failing vac truck that serves the stormwater function. So we are adding that. That's just under a $500,000 piece of equipment. So that is a significant investment in that budget. The sanitation piece, this is the one that I highlighted in the opening comments. This is a significant increase in the monthly fee. We're moving up from $23 a month to $31 a month. This is consistent with the full study of the cost of service that it takes to deliver the wide range of residential services that we provide and the revenue that we generate from operating a transfer station and the tip fee that we essentially charge there. This would provide for a fully self-sufficient fund. This would be that leap forward and would make it so that we would not expect to have a general fund subsidy in supporting the operations and meeting the state required fund balance for that operating fund. As an example, we're putting about $1.75 million in general fund subsidy in that fund in fiscal 24. So this is where we are with it. We have provided for good long-term planning. We've got about 10 years of landfill and recycling processing capacity secured by contract over the last year. And so that's a baseline as well. So we are basing that cost of service on a level of cost certainty that we have by contract for those key components in terms of tip fees and processing fees. All right, a couple other things I'll touch on. Hotel motel continues to be a really important funding source for our CVB. We dedicate 1 of the 4 cents of hotel motel tax to support that operation to promote and support the tourism industry. And Williamson County is the number 6 tourism county in the state of Tennessee. So that's a strong position to be in. We do have debt service that we pay out of there. We did see a decrease of about $300,000 in debt service that's coming out of the hotel motel tax. We also support it's sort of a backstop for our conference center that we own jointly with the county. We'll be funding some enhancements or renovations at the conference center this year jointly with the county using American Rescue Plan dollars, so about $1.2 million each going into that project. And then we're supporting some other projects, capital projects that have some tourism components to it. The upgrade of lighting, sports lighting at Jim Warren, a update of our preservation plan, and a one-time contribution to the Merrill Williams home, which is a renovation project of a historic home in the Natchez neighborhood. So that's the hotel motel tax overview. And within the development services component, so this is our facilities tax, our road impact fees, our parkland dedication. Those continue pretty much as we are. We're meeting significant debt obligations out of road impact, and we are purchasing a few select pieces of equipment from city facilities that relate to expanded service needs. And so that area is there. And elements of this will be impacted by the capital investment program that the board's continuing to work on in terms of an update and reprioritization. Those are key elements of the cash funding that goes into that capital investment program. Water and wastewater, we've got a overall $55.1 million budget, 15.8 million of which is in water, just under 39 million of which is in the sanitary sewer or water reclamation function, and around 370,000 supports the reclaimed water system. We are implementing 3% increase in water and a 2.5% increase in sewer effective January 1. The board has actually already approved those rate increases. But there is also, I will give you kind of a fair warning, there is a update of a cost of service study that we've been working on that we will bring to the board in the next few months that will take a new 5-year outlook and will incorporate updated costs and estimates for system upgrades and expansions. So that will be something for the board to consider, and that will shape where those rates go over the next 5 years with your guidance there. Some other key components, we are this current budget represented the first full year of debt payments for the loans that have helped support the upgrade and expansion of the water reclamation facility. That's a $119 million loan at a little under 1.5% interest for a 30-year period. And so that continues to be a portion there, and we carefully watch our debt service coverage related to those outstanding obligations, and are projecting that we will be well within compliance there as well. We do support a number. We have about 17 million of capital that's going into the current system, collection and distribution system. A chunk of that is supported by American Rescue dollars as well. We've been able to tap into some funds coming through TDEC along with our direct allocation that is impacting water and wastewater. Those are really the only areas of infrastructure that were permitted for those funds when you look at it. So again, we continue to place our operation, our city government in a strong competitive position, delivering high quality services to our community. Our debt obligations are at a good manageable level, and we are consistently investing in key services that support the community and support our team in delivering excellent service. We will continue to look at delivering on your priorities and capital investment projects. We're in the midst of updating those priorities and looking at an update of the 10-year plan. But we have projects that are underway today or will be underway by the end of this year that are really important, really impactful projects. And again, we end this year with a very strong, well above your policy levels reserve, so that we will be able to manage and provide sustainable service as we go forward. I'll just stop my comments with just a word of thanks to you for your support and your diligence and the many budget meetings we've had through the first part of this year, and the support of the board. The feedback we got on program enhancements was very helpful. A second year of more direct engagement and feedback from you, I think, has been helpful there. I mentioned before we were able to support 14 of your top 15 in this budget. And I think that's a strong statement of hearing you and trying to apply that along with the high priorities our department leadership has identified as we move forward. I want to thank every department puts a lot into the budgets they submit to you, and what they share with you is a labor of love, and we appreciate what they do and providing that service, and how the budget is so vital in supporting it. So I thank department leadership and the folks that work on those budgets for what they have done to provide good input into this process. I want to thank the budget team. I want to thank the assistant city administrators for their help. HR plays a critical role in reviewing positions and the classification of those positions to make sure they're right and reflective of where the market is. And I'm honored to work with this team to give you a budget that we think continues to deliver on the promise of a high-performing city, delivering great service, and really focused on both the needs of today, but also what it's going to take to be that highly competitive, highly desirable city in the future. So thank you for your time, and I'm glad to take any questions. And thanks to our team for their great work on this.
Mr. Potts, we'll go to you first. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I go to any questions, I just want to reiterate the thanks of the time invested in putting this together. It is very comprehensive, and so Michael, team, everybody that's involved, Eric, you've named everybody. It's a remarkable task that everybody has undertaken to get us to this balanced budget. I think the only thing that I have here as I'm looking at it, only one word kind of popped to me, and it was on slide 29, and it was still narrowly within our debt service coverage requirements. Anytime you see something like that and on a finance report, I always want to ask that question. So I'll ask maybe for the a little bit more clarity on that piece.
Sure, we have a debt coverage requirement of 1.25, and so we watch that closely. There are some, it is a tighter percentage that we're projecting right now, but we are still clearing that hurdle. But we're watching it carefully. We want to make sure we're there. So Christine or Michael may want to speak to it a little more directly, but it's an obligation that we have, and we want to make sure we are meeting it. When you got a lot of demands on both an expanding system, but also an older elements of our system that's older, you've got to hit the right balance of what you're investing in to support existing infrastructure, as well as the build out of the new, both on the treatment, but also on the collection and on the water distribution side. So Christine may want to touch on that.
I'll just comment. This is exactly just like you remarked. This is maintaining our bond covenants and our debt covenants is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And certainly for a number of years, while we've had this bond covenant for a long time of debt service coverage, we've never been really close to it until we actually issued $130 million for the wastewater treatment plant. It was a $153 million project. It was $119 million from the state, and we did borrow $10 million from the open markets for the wastewater plant when the state had actually pulled back on what they were willing to lend us. So we had to go out to the open market for about $10 million. So we were around 1.5 coverage last year. Once the audit was done, we do report that in our audited financial statements as well as disclosures for our debt. So these debt covenants are required both by the state of Tennessee for revolving loans as well as our open market securities. So it is something that we do have to live with and abide with until 2053, until our state revolving loan fund debt is gone. We issue debt on a shorter term in the open market, so but that's something that we will always be required to meet. So that's probably a little bit more comment than I needed to make, but it is something that we are watching very closely, and we are acknowledging that we are tighter than we've ever been because we have more debt in this utility than we've ever had before. And I think Michael has a budget perspective.
Page 254 of your big book identifies, it's a debt service coverage page. Our audited financials in 2022 had a debt coverage ratio of 1.47 for the Water Management Fund. We ended last year at 1.59. We are forecasting to end this year around 1.59, and the budget amount for next year is 1.52. Now, Christine and I would say that's narrow coverage. Especially when you look back before we issued that debt, it was over 3 at one time. It does not need to be over 3, mind you. But it is tighter and narrower, and we just want to make sure that we're covering that obligation first, because legally we have to cover that obligation first.
But I will acknowledge when we were at 2 times coverage or 3 times coverage, the system was primarily cash funding capital. And when you switch to being primarily debt funded for large capital projects, your debt service coverage does narrow significantly. And so that's just kind of you with a water and sewer utility, you will have capital costs, and they are getting more expensive as the years go by. You will always have capital expenditures in order to keep and maintain that system. And so that was why when such a large percentage of the plant was debt funded, that's just kind of that's the math of how we have a narrower debt service coverage in the near future.
Well, I appreciate the additional insight. Whenever you see finance and the word narrow, it's always good to get greater clarity on that. Yeah, I was also going to point out on slide 27, it was under sanitation. Eric, I appreciate the more detailed explanation about the increase from $23 to $31, and that the reason for the increase was that we were having to subsidize, you said 1.75 million annually for that.
Yeah.
And so this eliminates that, and now we'll be breaking even, not turning a profit. This is just to make sure that we're not having to subsidize anything.
Yes, and the more detailed 5-year cost of service study helps us look at that on a broader scale in terms of what do we need to put in to maintain equipment at the right level in terms of replacements, et cetera. What are our staffing needs? What are the costs that are coming to us to tip at the landfill or go to the recycling process center? So all of that is factored in with a greater degree of certainty, but also with the new contracts that we've negotiated over the last year or so. So it really is a full costing of what it takes to deliver those services and what does that turn out to be from a rate structure. We do truly turn a little bit of a profit from the transfer station. But that's by design. We are providing a very valuable service to private haulers in terms of they can come to us. They don't have to go much farther to a landfill to dump. They can come to us and we manage it and take it from there. So we're looking at what we think the market will bear there, but it does help offset a little bit what our residents have to pay. If we didn't have that, this rate would actually be a little higher. So we try to balance all that and project out what we think those cost demands will be over the next 5 years in setting this rate. This is the big jump. From here, I think you would see more annual inflationary type of adjustments. But at some point, you're going to have to make the leap to get to that higher level to make sure you're really fully supporting it through ratepayers, which has been, to this point, the general policy direction of the board. If you want to go a different place with those rates, then you're going to have to look at a more intentional general fund subsidy, which then takes dollars away from general fund services. So we think this reflects what the general policy direction has been, but you all can tell us that when you approve this approach or not. So.
Okay. And as you just said, you were talking about the 2 to 3% increase possibly annually. Well, we already have that in. Will that already be in the policy, or how will that need?
In
to be
terms
done?
of the sanitation rates, you will see a fee projection that will go out over the next 5 years, and I wouldn't say it'd be 2 or 3%. It'll be based on what we're projecting those costs out. It may be a $2 type of level of change, just to make sure we're staying in line with those cost demands.
Good.
So that's what we do with water and sewer. It's taking that same philosophy and applying it to the sanitation service that we provide to residents as well. So it's trying to run it like an independent business unit, and so those costs reflect that approach.
Okay, good. And I asked that just so that residents understand that's the plan in place, so we don't have a big bump in the future then. I did have a question on 15. This was where this was part of the summary, and you had gone into a little bit of detail, but you talked about the April 3% police pay increase.
Oh, yeah.
And then you had also mentioned that there was a review that was coming about for fire. Will that review, is that something that could be acted upon in 25, or is that something that we would have to delay until the next budget?
No, it would be in this budget. And in fact, you may act on it in the tail end of 24, depending on if we have all the information together and a clear direction for you. And it is similar to the approach we took in police in that we are targeting being in that 90th percentile or better. So we will see how that lays out, how we compare in a competitive position to others in the region. And so it will be that same target. It may not be the exact same change as you saw in police, but it'll be reaching that same goal of being in that very top echelon of pay. And like I said, my goal would be that we are able to present that by the end of this month to you, and then that would give you something you could act on, similar to what you did with police. But this budget anticipates that fully funded in fiscal '25. So yeah, you'll be able to act on that really as soon as we bring it to you and as soon as you're comfortable moving forward.
Excellent. Mr. Chair, those were my questions. And again, I'd like to thank all staff for all of the work that they put in on this. Thank you, sir.
Alderman Peterson? No questions. All right. Then I have a couple comments.
Sure.
And they are, it is back to one of the things that we just covered, the sanitation, $8 a month increase. And I'm sitting here thinking, we have pulled that out, and you mentioned, I think, a year ago, or at one time, we were doing $3 or $4 million.
Oh yeah, it was close to 5 at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of that, and not showing the citizens where that money, where it was actually coming from. But $8 a month going from 23 to 31 is a pretty good increase. And in doing that, I'm sitting there thinking, if there are a number of things. Number one, if we've got 80-something million in fund balance, and if we are locked in at 33% or 33 million, whatever it is, and then we want to keep up to 45 million, then we're looking at 40 million in fund balance. That doesn't disturb me if it was just there for an emergency. But it doesn't appear as if it's there exactly for an emergency. It is, and we use the term, it is to cover capital improvements projects, and we pay some on the money and some we borrow for one thing or another. And that somewhat disturbs me when we do that. We've got that kind of a fund balance. It means to me that we have not necessarily over collected, but if we did more, Eric, if we did more borrowing, let's say,
Yeah.
then that 14 million that came out of property taxes that went into the fund balance would disappear. That means that you would have less in your overall fund balance budget, that you wouldn't be tempted. I don't say tempted, because that's probably a poor word for a politician to use, that they're tempted to spend the money if they've got it. But that I'm just sitting here thinking that there probably is a way of looking at that a little different from the way I look at it. But that's a great deal of money. Now, let me ask you this. You had I thought that, and this is a little bit different, I thought that we did like 1% on that state revolving fund loan for the wastewater treatment plant.
About 1.5, yeah,
But
it's
I-
just under
but I
1.5
thought you
for
said-
30 years.
Okay, I thought you said there was 4%.
No, it's under 1.5%.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So that 119 million is borrowed at one point, under 1.5.
Under 1.5
Okay.
for a 30-year. We're a little over, a little less than 2 years into a 30-year loan.
And then we did a 10 because we had to have the money in between when we needed, when
Yeah.
we couldn't get it, and we did need it.
That's right.
So that's 129. So we've already spent then how much on that? Do you?
You pretty much spent it all.
We pretty much spent it all. We're just doing the last bills
Yeah.
on the
Okay.
plant on that $153 million plant project. We're getting the final bills in.
Okay. So that little chart that we got yesterday, we said this was 100 and the news release. You remember what it said? It said there was 123 or 100.
133 is the construction cost.
Okay.
But when you factor in design, you're at 150.
Okay. So
Plus,
so
yeah.
the news release.
It
Sure.
talked about the construction number.
Okay. All right.
But the true full project cost is around 150.
We've always looked
Yeah.
at it as being $150 million.
That's right.
That probably is on my comments. I mean, we need to have a chance to, again, go through these a little bit more. So my other comment is this. When we go back and look at the property tax rate in the 1980s, and it's $2 and something.
Yes.
And some of us, Alderman Peterson, should have been around when we were looking at that, and we were. I don't remember why we had such a high property tax rate at that particular time.
It's because you didn't have a Cool Springs Galleria Mall, as I would submit. Yeah, let's see that chart.
Yeah.
Slide 19.
Yeah, there it is. Right. Yeah, there it is. So you look at that, you look at getting, and you have a significant investment that started to take place in not just the mall, but other commercial space, office space, et cetera. You know, that's when you saw Ford Motor Credit come in. So you look at late 80s, early 90s, that's when the game really started to shift in terms of a more consumption-based revenue coming into the city.
Because the mall probably opened in 90 or 91.
Early 90s, yeah, yeah. So there's a pretty good correlation.
Because it wasn't built in 88 and it wasn't
That's right.
completed in 89.
That's right. So I think that's a pretty good correlation in terms of the history of it and history of commercial development in Franklin.
We often look at the financial fortunes and really modern era of finances for the city of Franklin begin because the sales tax doubled year over year when the mall opened. And so going back to about 1990 is about as far back historically as we would go because it's just been a completely different story from that point moving forward.
So has the debt service taken into account, say, the 80 or whatever it is million for City Hall? Has that,
We haven't issued that debt yet, but your capital investment financing strategy or plan does.
that's what,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So when we've built that out, and that's depending on which version you look at, it's somewhere around 45% debt and 55% cash. That is factored into that balance in terms of how we're funding those projects as a whole.
So in dollars and cents, the 55% is how much?
Oh gosh, Michael, what would that be? Probably around 300 million. Because it's around a $500 million CIP today,
Okay.
with the updated costs that we gave you.
Page 316 of your budget. The ratio, and again, the way we've constructed this, we put in the presentation from late January in your budget for your reference. That had projected resources over the next 10 years of 54% cash to the tune of $228.4 million and 46% debt to the tune of $195 million. Added to that are existing resources, the cash you already have accumulated of, I want to say roughly, $87 million or so if you accumulate everything between road impact, parkland, city facilities, general fund cash, that over 45% amount that we've talked about.
All right.
If I may just give, very quickly, the last general obligation bond issue was issued May of 2019. And in the proceeds of the 2019 issue the large project was the Franklin Road improvements. It also funded the bridge out at where the Southeast Park's going to be. We did some sidewalk work, and then we also did replacement fire apparatus and major road resurfacing. And of course, all those proceeds have been spent, but that was the last.
So how much was that?
It was around 26 million. I mean, it was in that range.
That's okay.
But, and certainly the last 5 years, we have been paying principal and interest on debt while we haven't issued any more project debt since May of 2019. So that gives you just a little bit of history on the last city bond issue, what was used with those proceeds.
Any other questions or comments? Alderman Peterson, does that? Mayor, you have a comment or a question? Go right ahead.
More comments. When I look back on the sanitation fund back in 2007, I remember being told that every single dollar of our property tax went to supplement solid waste. And we've been chasing our tail ever since, trying to catch up. And so this is a big increase, I agree. But I think that our goal has been to make it an enterprise type fund, and I think this gets us there and hopefully keeps us there. The other thing I would say about our reserve fund balance is that a lot of that reserve fund balance we have, we're factoring in to future capital projects that we have. So, I mean, it seems like a big amount, but whenever we start looking at some of the capital projects we've committed to, it's going to whittle it down quite a bit. So, great presentation. Thank you, Eric, and thanks for all the great comments. And I don't know how many pages of this book you've turned yet. It is full of information. It's really good. And I'm not a numbers person like Ann, so.
So this presentation really covers, gosh, items 4 through 7 on your budget, on this agenda, but we would like action, moving it forward to the board.
All of them.
Yeah, item 4 is the actual budget itself. Item 5 is the establishment of the property tax levy for the coming fiscal year. Item 6 is the update of the fees specifically related to the trash and recycling or garbage and refuse fee. And then item 7 is the water and sewer budget itself that we adopt really through a resolution. We kind of do belts and suspenders with that one because it's in your budget, but it also has a separate resolution moving it forward, estimating revenues and expenditures. So if you would act on each of those and move those to the board, and they will see it for first reading on the 28th of May.
I'm going to take just a short liberty with the items and read only consideration of draft ordinance 2024-17. I'll entertain a motion to approve and forward to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Let's do a vote. Let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes to that. Passes 3-0. Let's go to item 5 then, which is consideration of draft ordinance 2024-18. Same heading. We'll entertain a motion to approve and forward to the full board.
Move for move for us to approve and provide this to the board.
Second.
Proper motion is second. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Let's go to item 6 then, which is consideration of draft ordinance 2024-19. Same scenario, will approve through the committee, forward to the full board for approval.
So moved.
Proper motion, is there a second?
Second.
Then let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that. So, item 7, which is consideration of draft resolution 2024-32. Same scenario.
This is the water and
Yeah.
water and
This
sewer.
Water and
the
sewer
water.
budget, essentially.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve and recommend to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Motion second. All
Second.
Okay. Then let's do a roll call vote on that also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. That takes care of those 4 items. Let's go to item 8, which is consideration of resolution 2024-30, I'm sorry. It's a 2024-36, a resolution adopting a revised purchasing policy for the city of Franklin, Tennessee. Procurements not pertaining to the design and/or construction of new infrastructure and facilities. Yes, sir, you're up.
Good afternoon, members of the Budget and Finance Committee. My name is Brian Wilcox, and it's my pleasure to serve as the city's purchasing manager. The city's purchasing policy for city procurements not pertaining to new construction was last updated on June 27, 2023, by means of Resolution 2023-27. Staff recommends several changes to this policy as reflected in the attached document, but none of them are substantive. Resolution 2024-36 as proposed, including the revised policy as proposed, is attached. Also attached is a red line version of the revised policy as proposed. This red line version has marked all the recommended changes to the text of the policy. Again, none of them are substantive. Staff is not aware of any adverse financial impact of these proposed policy changes and recommends the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, by way of the committee, approve Resolution 2024-36, a resolution adopting a revised purchasing policy for city procurements not pertaining to the design or construction of new infrastructure and facilities.
Any questions? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve and forward to the full board for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Proper motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. And Mr. Wilcox, your name is next to number 9, which is consideration of resolution 2024-37, a resolution adopting a revised vendor protest procedure for City of Franklin procurements not pertaining to new construction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city's vendor protest procedure was last updated on July 12, 2022 by means of resolution number 2022-42. Staff recommends the vendor protest procedure be further revised as follows. First, by adding a provision stating that a protest based upon the cancellation of a procurement solicitation in whole or in part is not actionable and shall not be considered. And then secondly, by making miscellaneous clarifications and other improvements to the policy, none of which are substantive. Resolution number 2024-37 as proposed, including the revised vendor protest procedure as proposed, is attached. Also attached is a red line version of the revised vendor protest procedure as proposed. This red-lined version has marked all recommended changes to the text of the vendor protest procedure. Staff is not aware of any financial impact of approving the proposed revisions to the vendor protest procedure and recommends the Board of Mayor and Aldermen consider approving Resolution 2024-37, a resolution adopting a revised vendor protest procedure for City of Franklin procurements not pertaining to new construction. I might add that in our office, the purchasing office, we think of the protest procedure as similar to insurance or taking an umbrella to a baseball game so that it won't rain. It's an important document for us to have up our sleeve, but we hope we never need it. And knock on wood, we haven't needed it very often in the last 20 years. So I hope I don't jinx anything by saying that, but I just want you to know that we think it's critically important that it be maintained and updated from time to time. This idea of adding the concept of not allowing a protest based upon the cancellation of a procurement solicitation came from the state of Tennessee, who made that very change to their own vendor protest policy and procedure. And I thought it was such a good idea that I asked our law department if that was something we could incorporate into our policy. The scenario would be if, for example, a bid comes in over budget and we don't want to proceed. If we decide to cancel, reject all bids, cancel the solicitation, we're not going to tolerate them protesting that. That's a decision that is exclusively your purview. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Then I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2024-37 and forward to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Proper motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote on that. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes also on that. Mr. Wilcox, thank you. Appreciate that. Item number 10, report on property taxes collected for fiscal year 2024, which is tax year 2023. Christine and Jessica, you're up. Whichever one wishes to go first.
Well, I'll introduce, once again, we have someone at our table that is, hopefully we'll have a new title here very shortly, but thankfully get to continue working with Jessica Davy, who we hope will become our billing and licensing director here in the next coming months. So something that we have talked about bringing to this committee in a report fashion is a report on the collection of property taxes. And certainly, you just have heard a detailed presentation about how we plan to spend our taxes in the next coming fiscal year. This reports on the collection of property taxes in our current fiscal year, fiscal '24. We are one of the many things that Jessica has brought to our organization is she served as a deputy trustee for a good number of years in an adjacent county to us before she joined our team. So while Karen Paris, Williamson County trustee, collects property taxes on behalf of the city of Franklin, Jessica has an insight for the tax collection process in Tennessee. So that is a valuable knowledge to have. And she's going to give an update on property tax collections through about middle of April. That was provided to her from Karen Paris's office.
Thank you, Christine, and good afternoon, members of the Budget and Finance Committee. So just a brief report on property tax collection. This is regarding the 2023 property tax year, which, as you know, and as Christine mentioned, are collected on behalf of the City of Franklin by the Office of the Williamson County Trustee. We enjoy a great working relationship with them and appreciate all they do for us to collect these taxes. And as you can see from the attached report, they do a really great job of collecting those taxes. I actually was able to get an update from Karen Paris this morning, and we have 1.76% still outstanding. So actually less than 2% of the taxes are outstanding as of today. And these taxes that are delinquent, of course, now that the due date has passed, the last day to pay taxes without incurring penalty and interest was February 29th of 2024. It was leap year this year, so our taxpayers had an extra day this year. But now that the due date has passed, the trustee's office will ramp up their collection efforts over the summer. The personalty and public utility taxes, if they are not paid by September 1st, those will be referred to a delinquent tax attorney that will begin collection efforts. The real property taxes, if not paid by next February, will be turned over in March. So in those timeframes, the trustee's office will continue to send notices. They even make phone calls to the businesses on the personal property taxes and do everything they can to collect those from the taxpayers. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to get into any of these details on the chart regarding the specific categories of taxes. I'm glad to talk about that.
Is that a normal number for uncollected?
Yeah, well, for our taxes, yes. Generally speaking, the county trustee does a really great job, and we usually have 99.9% of our taxes are collected. So I would say we are on track to be at that same collection rate this year. Not necessarily normal across the state. Yeah.
Any questions? Alderman Peterson, no questions. Thank you. No action required. And Margaret is up. And Margaret, bring Mike with you because he's not, he may be retiring. Oh, look.
His last budget presentation.
Peanut gallery.
All right.
You can tune in next year.
This then is monthly reports from May of
sir.
2024.
Yes. As usual, I just want to point out that sales tax is holding strong, that we're doing excuse me, and building permits are up 30% higher than the prior year. And of course, we all know that's dependent on development and everything like that. I did want to make one note in case you did not see it. The facilities tax from the county, we have not received, ma'am.
They're gonna do it differently, right?
Well, I don't know if they're doing it differently. We're accruing for it now, so it actually hits the correct month, but we have not received the check for March facilities tax yet. I keep checking with revenue management to see if it comes in the mail. I'm not saying the county's running late. It could be the mailman hasn't delivered it yet. So just so you know, so we'll have 2 months, hopefully by June, reports that we will.
It does sound like more county than the mailman though, doesn't it?
I did not say that. So, but I just wanted to make you
But
aware.
I can go there.
You can. But yeah, just in case you compare reports to last month, it is the same number. We're just unfortunately having to wait for that check to come in to know the dollar amount.
Any questions of Margaret? Any additional information you'd like to add? All right. Mr. Michael, any questions? Eric? Where's the mayor? Mayor, you got questions? I wouldn't.
No, we've covered the budget landscape. We will have a meeting in June, and then you get July off.
Okay.
You've earned that July respite from all your extra
July.
meetings in March and February and
And then we
whatever.
skip November, then we go almost and move up the December meeting a little earlier then. Okay.
Yep, that's right. You got it.
So let's run
Got
that
it.
again. Our next one is when?
13th of June. Yeah.
Let's double check.
Well, we will not drag this out any longer. I'll entertain a motion. If there's no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Question before we adjourn, what's going to be our start time on the 13th?
I think we're still sticking with 3.
Still with
unless
3?
you want to.
Okay,
Okay.
we good? All right. Motion to adjourn?
Proper motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.